I seek a correction, Mr Mayor.
I
pointed this out, but
no, and I thank you, Councillor Elmore, with pointing out that, and I'll make sure if we move it that those will be included. Do we want to do that, Mr Govers, now, or what needs to be included in that item?
So, through you, Mr Mayor, on page 22 of the business paper, under item 3, towards the bottom of the page, it currently reads former Holroyd City Council rate path. It needs to be amended to read former Holroyd City Council and Parramatta City Council rate path.
I just want to understand if I get a refund for my stormwater levy that I paid last year because it was on the business paper.
Thank you, Councillor Elmore. The 110 investment report. No. 111, the low cost loan initiative. No. 112, the update on the implementation of the Stronger Community Fund. No. 113, the adoption of the operation plan. Yes. Yes, I've had several calls. I know that I believe Councillor Lake probably had first cab off the rank. 114, the organic collection grants. No. 115, the Lakewood Estate Riparian Corridor Plan of Management. No. 116, the quarterly progress report of submissions received for the Council's consultative and advisory committees. No. And then we're in the notice of motions, which have to be discussed. So, Council, can I have a mover? Councillor Addy, who was? Oh, I've got Councillor Campbell. So, item 109, 110, 111, 112, 114, 115, and 116 be moved in an omnibus by Councillor Addy and Councillor Campbell. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Councillor Lake, item 113, adoption of the operation plan, fees and charges.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. I'll move the recommendation, but with 2 amendments to the fees and charges proposed for the 2018-19 year. And I think somebody's kindly guessed what I was going to say and cleverly put it up, but I can't read it. I'll have to trust them that what I'm proposing is that we revert to the 2017 annual permit fees for personal training and group fitness training on page 71 of the fees and charges document, and that we omit the fee for the cat trap hire and pensioner hire, which I think means pensioner rate for cat trap hire. Yeah. I've got a pensioner, I don't need to hire another one. But 2 for 1, you reckon? Yeah. So just in relation to those changes, I understand at the moment that what's being proposed is that the personal trainer's permit fee be reduced. Currently it's a maximum, I think, of about $1,500, and it's proposed to reduce it to $250. And I can see an argument that that reduction will encourage personal trainers to register, and then we can better regulate them to ensure that we can regulate their operations to certain hours and ensure they don't come onto the fields when the fields are closed, for instance, and all that makes sense. But I also think there's an equity issue around how they're treated in relation to fees as compared to our voluntary sporting organisations who also pay fees for using our sports grounds. And I know that in the personal training space there's some quite large businesses now setting up in our parks, and I don't think they should be paying less than our voluntary sporting organisations. So I think this is an issue which requires further exploration, and I think it would be useful for the council officers to do some fact finding and just find out exactly what is going on in our sports grounds in relation to these businesses. And it would be helpful then for us to have a briefing and a workshop discussion around the policy that we should go forward with in relation to personal trainers' use of our parks and sports grounds. The fee reduction that's being proposed has been put forward tonight after the document came back from public consultation. So the fee reduction hasn't been on exhibition. And I think if we do decide to reduce this fee, then it is a matter that should go out for exhibition, and we should consider any submissions that come back on it. So that's why I'm proposing that we just stick with the status quo for now. And have a further discussion about it. In relation to cat traps, I think if it's done humanely, then it's something that we should be encouraging, and perhaps the best way to do that is to make the traps freely available. So I'm proposing that the fee for hiring the cat traps be taken and it be free. There's still a fee in the fees and charges as a refundable bond. So if you take a cat trap, you pay a bond and you get that back when you return the trap. I think that's useful too, to ensure that we get our equipment back. So the other thing I'd like to do is hear from the Companion Animals Committee about the cat trap program, and I wouldn't mind their views on this, because I think the committee are pretty knowledgeable about the way these things are being used in our area. So that's all I wanted to say about the fees and charges, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Christou, are you seconding that with those amendments as written?
I am, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. Do you wish to speak?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I agree, and I thank my colleague Councillor Lake for raising these two very important issues. For one, I have a bit of a background in the personal training kind of industry, and I fully agree. Look, this is going to pose a potential big issue where we have personal trainers and boot camps, which often at times are very lucrative businesses that charge quite a lot of money per hour to customers and can have groups anywhere between 2, 5, 10, 15, 20 in one session. Being allowed to pay a fee essentially of $250, which is what is being proposed for a year, over community groups, cricket clubs, soccer groups, little athletics groups that are not for profit and actually provide an important service to our community. Now that's majorly unfair in my view. I won't be supporting the fees as they are, and I thank Councillor Lake for taking this on board and supporting the initiatives that we discussed, and we need to workshop this and see how we can come up with a more equitable arrangement and balance, because I just don't see, and I'm sorry to say this because I speak plainly, even if there is a fee reduction, I just don't see it being passed on to the clientele. Thank you.
Councillor Christou, Councillor Zeta.
Just through you, Mr. Mayor. I'd be actually interested in getting some information as to why the recommendation was put forward to reduce the price. What's the logic?
Mr. Burns.
Oh, I see.
For you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendation was put forward simply because at the present time we don't have a large number of personal trainers registered with council to use our fields, and with as many parks as we do, it's very difficult for us to police those personal trainers who are coming onto our fields and using them. This does cause some issues, as Councillor Lake has referred to, with clubs being upset that personal trainers have used fields that may be closed. In order to persuade them or encourage them to register with council, we felt that a fee drop was appropriate. It's been benchmarked against other local councils in the area, and the fee drop we thought would encourage, as I said, the groups to register with us, and then we could police them and manage them, advise them when grounds were closed, talk to them about appropriate certification and liability insurance and the like. At the moment, we don't have that information, and personal trainers are a significantly unknown quantity to us.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So you've actually compared our fees compared to other surrounding councils, and the surrounding councils are charging approximately this recommended amount?
Mr Mayor, the surrounding councils are charging between $0 and $750 for a similar permit.
Okay.
We can bring that information fully to a workshop and outline that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, councillor Zeta. Councillor Elmore?
Yeah, I'll just get the right page if I can, Mr Mayor. Got with these computers, and I don't have the same sort of skills as the young people with these computers. Trying to convert. First of all, I'd like to congratulate council about the fees and charges. It's been I understand it's been a very, very difficult task for them to harmonise both three different fees and charges structures, and the previous fees and charges under the administrator, they were caused a big problem for our residents. I had lots of people complaining about that. You probably get more complaints about the fees and charges from our residents than anybody else. But well, one inquiry I got the other day was first wanted to hire the Granville Town Hall, and they thought it was too expensive. I said, well, just wait till the new fees and charges come through, and you'll probably find there'll be a big cost reduction. But I just want to finish with a question. If council adopts these fees and charges and all the other parts of this report tonight, will the fees and charges come into effect on 1st of July 2018?
That's my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Lake?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just if we could add to the resolution that the cat trapping program be referred to the Companion Animals Committee for further discussion and advice back to council.
As we speak, Councillor Lake. Any further discussion? No further discussion. Right of reply, Councillor Lake? No. So, council, you'll have the recommendation with those amendments as written. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Declare that carried. Council, we have a notice of motion, council item CO6/18-117, and that's a request for rework. Let's get to the item. On page 589, Councillor Garrard was putting up this notice of motion, so I'll hand over to Councillor Garrard.
Yeah, just got here in time, didn't I?
You did.
Sorry I was late. Mr Mayor, councillors, the motion that is supported by Councillor Christo and Elmore probably speaks for itself. They would know, and others would know,
Just for your advice, I believe Councillor Christo has withdrawn his name from the motion, but Councillor Elmore has kept his name. And so to expedite, you're seconding this, Councillor? Thank you. So,
the intersection is an extremely bad one, and as one would know that right through local government areas, bad intersections in the main have been planned by having corner roundings so that there are sight lines when you get there. The situation is, of course, this particular intersection has deteriorated over the years, particularly with people having a rat run, getting off the M4 and Parramatta Road coming through the city. So by virtue of that, this intersection is taking an enormous amount of traffic. We are hampered by the fact that there is a fence on the corner which is marginally too high, and looking into the future, it would be better if there was a corner rounding so that the sight lines could be improved and generally traffic improved and safety improved as well. So I think the resolution speaks for itself. In the main, it's asking for a report on the options available.
thank you, Councillor Garrard. Councillor Rami?
Just through you, Mr Mayor, can I ask is there any way we can get a track, one, as to how many incidents have happened in the last 10 years at that intersection? And two, what's actually caused the reduced line of sight? Because I know, sure, I've heard about this item Parramatta days, and it has hung around for a while. I don't actually think the line of sights have deteriorated. The lines of sight, the diminishing aspect of the line of sight has been caused by other factors. Can we maybe just get some more information on
Mr Govers?
Through you, Mr Mayor, certainly we could, through our traffic section, be able to provide the number of incidents that have been recorded and information passed on to council.
Is there any background on this item?
In terms of this particular site, I'm aware from information that's been provided to council by councillors and also the residents, there has been accidents in the past at this site. I can't provide you with details of the dates and times that they've occurred, but I'm aware that accidents have occurred at that location.
Not just so that we've got a bit more information, not to lean one way or the other, but just so that, you know, it justifies whether, you know, it helps people with their decision, I guess.
Thank you, Councillor Rami. I have Councillor Elmore, then Councillor Addy. Councillor Elmore.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I will speak briefly to this because, as people know, I've lived around that area all my life, and the streets around that area are particularly narrow. So if you want to get from Auburn over to Maryland's Guildford area, you've got to come down Mona Street or Wellington Road. You've got to go through one of those streets, like Redfern Street. And Redfern Street, you're lucky to get 2 cars past at the same time. I had a look at the cataster, and people that know the cataster is an outline of lots. And the service station across the road has a rounded corner. The other corner doesn't. It's got a straight right angle. And I can't remember when that roundabout went in. Councillor Garrard probably knows. He's got a good memory, but I think the roundabout probably went in 10 years or more ago. And when the roundabout was constructed, the authority at the time, whether it be the RMS or council, did not splay that corner off like they should have. So when you, and as us drivers know, like Ned, who drives around the area frequently, he tells me, when you stop at a roundabout, you've got to stop back. You can't stop right on the property line. So when you stop back and look down Clyde Street, so you can turn either right or left into Clyde Street, there's this fence. So it's particularly dangerous. And when I first got on council all those years ago in Parramatta, and people ask a question, so what do you want to achieve in council? A lot of people can't say what they want to do. But when I got on council, I want to make the area safer. So if we get a report on how we can make this intersection safer, I certainly support that.
Thank you, Councillor Elmore. I have Councillor Addy and then Councillor Zareka. Councillor Addy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, can I indulge in having Mr Aidan Davis, not Aidan Davis, Mr Rodham, I think, is he, come down and answer a few questions? Only for the purpose of the councillors that actually could not make the briefing prior to the actual council meeting, which some of these questions were actually answered. However, thank you, Mr Rodham. Mr Rodham, what is the actual issue? I understand that some of our councillor colleagues have this, I suppose, wish list of making an intersection safe because it was actually made unsafe by someone else, not by the RMS or by anyone else. What is the actual issue with the fence?
Mr Rodham.
Yes, through you, Mr Mayor. I believe that the issue is that when... Okay, so I believe that the issue was created upon the construction of that fence in its current form, being made of a brick or a masonry type construction. And the construction itself doesn't comply with the exempt and complying development code, and no consent was obtained by council for the construction of that fence.
Now, I understand that you cannot, through you, Mr Mayor, cannot answer questions with respect to the DCP and the LEP unless you do have that knowledge.
No, I don't.
Mr Davis, please, Mr Mayor, through you.
Mr Davis, would you like to?
There'll be another question for you as well, Mr Rodham, so please don't, through you, Mr Mayor, so it doesn't disappear. It's always nice to get the full facts.
Yeah, no, yes. Thank you, Mr Davis. Councillor Addy.
So, Mr Davis, through you, Mr Mayor, Mr Davis, isn't it generally the case that a front boundary fence for any property in the DCPs generally, I can speak highly of Auburn and probably some of Holroyd, but Parramatta as well, is generally 1,200 high for the front boundary?
Through you, Mr Mayor, that's correct.
So the 1800 high fence that's there is not actually marginally higher, it is 50% higher than it should be.
Through you, Mr Mayor, and I believe that's the conclusion the officers came to as well, is that it is above the height that's permitted by the exempt and complying development code set without development approval, and even with development approval, which you need for a structural fence, like a masonry fence, it's well above that.
Okay, now I know we have to be very careful in what we're stating at the moment, because this is now turning into a planning matter, which council is actually forbidden to actually get and discuss. So the fence is actually too high. The fence is not splayed or recessed or tapered as the DCP is required. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr Mayor, the height as I understand it creates an issue, so it's non-compliant, but then the issue that's created out of that is it interferes with the sight line that crosses.
So it's not an issue with respect of the RMS or someone in the past putting a roundabout there and forgetting what's there. The issue is that the roundabout does comply. It's the actual fence and the way it was constructed doesn't comply. You speak up as I can hear you.
Sorry, I believe
Through you,
that's
Mr. Mayor,
correct.
sorry. Thank you very much. So, and confirming the fact, and I can go one step further and bring Mr. Fitzgerald down here and talk about the roundabout, if you'd like to indulge us as well. No? Okay, and the finance is all about getting the money to actually pay for it. No, it's okay. Mr. Mayor, we are now trying to circumvent a planning matter. We should not be indulging ourselves in issues that the compliance department, which we have no control over, technically speaking, with its operational matter.
We're asking for a report.
Mr. Mayor, the
We're not
report
getting
actually
involved in
states.
One moment.
Mr. Mayor, do we rule on the point of order first, Mr. Mayor?
Yes. So what is the point of order, councillor Elmore?
Well, we're asking for a report. We're not getting into planning matters at the moment. Maybe when the report comes back, we'll be able to speak about it with some more information.
So, but I understand,
The basis for the request of the report.
correct. And if the report takes into consideration planning matters, then we'll get the full details. You'll have a point, but so long as councillor Addy,
I'm not going to planning matters, Mr. Mayor, because the actual report, if I may go one step further, actually requests that council purchase land. I remember reading somewhere the council wished to look at purchasing a certain amount of land from the owner.
all I have is written on the screen.
Yeah, we're modifying the boundary fence on the private property. Now, for us to do that, we need to purchase the property. We are not a council that goes out there and fixes fences for private properties. Because they're putting the fact that it's actually a safety matter with respect of traffic safety. The issue is the traffic safety was generated because of the fence we're trying to repair. That's where the issue is.
And
So we are now putting the horse before the cart before the horse, going to fix a problem that was created by someone else, which has now become a safety matter.
And as you rightly demonstrated by getting the information, the full report would give us what obligations we would have, if any.
Yeah,
and
but, Mr. Mayor, I understand what you're saying. However, we are now requesting a report that actually seeks to modify a boundary fence. So someone in their infinite wisdom has actually already worked out that the boundary fence is the issue with regards to safety. And if the boundary fence has been erected incorrectly and illegally, then why are we going down the path of fixing a problem created by someone else on a private property? So therefore, I'd like to move an amendment, Mr. Mayor,
okay,
and that the matter be referred to the General Manager and the Compliance Department to assist in any way possible and not have council deal with this themselves.
councillor Addy, is that correct as written?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, do I have a second for that? Second, councillor Zarakis, I believe got the call first. I have councillor Zaraka, do you wish to speak? And then councillor Campbell, councillor Zaraka.
There's nothing really more to add, but yeah.
Councillor Campbell.
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to ask Mr. Davis or Mr. Stewart to clarify what action has been taken up to date Some of this was mentioned before the meeting, but I think it should be repeated at the meeting.
I believe that would be Mr. Rodham.
Yes. Through you, Mr. Mayor. The actions of council today relate back to, well, the issue first became before us in 2016 when a complaint was received from a member of the public. Since that time, the council has been liaising with the property owner in relation to the construction of the fence, and that resulted in the issue of an order. Following the issue of that order, I believe that there was a building certificate application lodged with the council in an attempt to regularise or formalise the fence in its current form, and I believe that that application has since been refused. Since that time, the council has once again revisited the matter with the property owner, drawing their attention back to the order which is in place, and that has resulted in some recent discussions with the property owner. There has been a request made by the property owner for an extension period of time within that order to allow them the opportunity to lodge a development application, which may consider some modifications to that fence to bring it into compliance.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Councillor Zeta.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm actually really worried about the fact that this has taken 2 years for us to try and resolve. I mean, just in terms of Cumberland Council dealing with this issue, it's been 16, we're in 2018. Just wondering, in this circumstance, if an accident does actually occur, are we liable for anything? Because we know the fence is illegally built. We know it's above what it's supposed to be. Yet it's been 2 years and we've done literally nothing about it aside from issuing correspondence. Like, if at the end of the day they applied to get or to regulate the actual construction of the wall or the fence, and that was refused.
I will interrupt Councillor Zeta. We're getting into legal specifics and we're getting close to going into closed council. So I'm just
wondering, do we have any legal liability attached to us as a result of this going for?
I believe no officer would like to answer that question in open council. Councillor Zeta.
Oh, we'll be asking that question in closed council then.
If you wish, or could be taken on notice and then send in a memo. Thank you, Councillor Zeta. Further discussion?
That, please.
Thank you, Councillor Garrard, and I'll take it that you're speaking against the amendment.
Well, at this point in time, I was going to speak against the amendment. Yeah, indeed. Look, I didn't go into great detail because I thought I went into enough detail, given the fact I'm asking for a report. You know, Councillor Addy talks about putting the cart before the horse. Well, quite frankly, I think we're treating this issue like as if this council's in the horse and sulky days, quite frankly. This is such a simple issue has been made out to be some sort of massive criminal case. Situation is the woman's in very bad health, has spent enormous amount of money on getting a surveyor and getting indeed a building certificate organised. She is not well off. I don't think she wanted me to be saying these things publicly, but obviously such a simple issue as this, you need to spell the facts out. The property surprised me that it was zoned B1. B1 means it's going to be business, but it's always been residential. I thought the business zoning finished maybe the property before this one. But if it's B1, and we talk about planning, if it was going to be business, that always should have had a corner rounding on that corner in order to address the business operation. On the further corner to the south, where there's a butcher shop, it's set well back from the corner and you don't have the same problem. That's planning. And so I think that should have happened when the B1 zoning was put over the land. The woman didn't know the B1 was on the land, I might add. I did ask her that. I understand she's been to the federal member of Parliament for the area, and that upset some of the Liberals. I can't help that. At the end of the day, it's about trying to address a concern that she has, that intermittently has built a fence to protect a family where 4 cars have gone into a front yard, which have been the subject of newspaper articles which have been able to be shown around, and the council staff have seen those. So she said, well, if I'm going to have cars come into my house, I'll put up a fence that won't allow cars to come into the house. And I can understand that. She didn't understand that her block of land was also zoned for a business. She has spent thousands of dollars on doing the work that she's done. And common sense prevails here, that when you go down and look at it, you'd say, well, why isn't there a corner rounding? You know, that's the common sense. You go, and I don't know whether you councillors are used to it or not, but it happens quite frequently now when you have bad corners, in order to address safety in traffic as an area gets further inundated. So I think the issue that there is a safety concern, and I'm satisfied of that because I've seen the articles. Not only that, I took the matter up with the administrator about a year ago, when this woman initially had a problem. I went around the area and I found, without trying too hard at all, 12 fences that did not comply with the DCP. And the further I drove around the area, and particularly when I start driving around Auburn, all I see is fences that don't comply with the DCP. Now, what are we going to do? Are we going to go out there and hammer everybody with compliance orders and fine them and get them to pull their fences down and start building them up again? Because if you do that, you're going to start a minefield. Now, I don't mind starting that, but I laid it on the table last year at the representative committee, wherever it was called, with the administrator, and I put 12 copies of photocopies on the table of fences that did not satisfy the DCP. Now, I don't know what happened after that. It went to sleep for 12 months and then it came back again. And the matter's back before us now. So I'm not going to start handing photographs around again. I'm trying to do it practically, and I'm asking for a report so that we buy 5 square metres probably, maybe a bit less than that, 5 square metres of a corner, and we create a corner rounding so forever and a day this fence issue goes away and there's a safety aspect addressed on that corner, and that's the reality of life.
Councillor Garrard,
I don't mind going back to the federal member of Parliament and saying, listen, this is the way it is, the Libs didn't like it. Okay?
Thank you, Councillor Garrard. I have Councillor Wong, then Councillor Addy. Councillor Wong.
I just have a question to Mr. Rodden. Councillor Garrard has raised quite a disturbing situation here. So do we have compliance officer go around the area to check whether people's wall are in compliance with the DCP?
I think I'll hand over to the Acting General Manager, Mr. Govers.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the staff aren't travelling around measuring people's front fences. We will act on complaints when they come to us.
What about the complaints that was shown to the previous administrator?
Mr. Govers.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd have to go back and look through the records. I'm not familiar with the 12 addresses that Councillor Garrard has raised.
I was personally there when Councillor Garrard did present those photos, so I know they were presented to the local representative, presented to the interim general manager and the administrator.
Thank you.
Councillor Addy, you're either well, I believe you've spoken to the amendment. You could speak against the motion, or
I can, but before I do that,
you want to ask the
I'd
question?
like to ask a question, please.
Certainly.
And the question, believe it or not, this is not on purpose, but I still need, he's part of the Works Department, so it's a road matter that's been brought up. So could Mr. Fitzgerald also come down here as well?
Mr. Fitzgerald, could you join us at the bench,
And if we
please?
start talking about the finance matter, we have to get Mr. Sheridan down here.
I hope not, Councillor Addy.
Exactly, so I mean, no one's
we might have to take that into consideration with another item.
Mr Mayor, through you.
Thank you, Councillor Addy.
To Mr Fitzgerald, this issue that's been brought up about rounded corners, is it a policy that we actually round corners? Because I don't seem to see many roundabouts that have round corners in the LGA as part of the roadworks.
Through you, Mr Mayor, if I can just clarify, I believe the rounded corner, I think in relation to the motion, refers to the boundary of the property, not in relation to the road.
Not the actual road.
Correct.
And the rounded corner, in your opinion, through you, Mr Mayor, would be to actually enhance visual effect of cars driving past the intersection.
Through you, Mr Mayor, yeah, that's correct, Mr Mayor.
So the next question would be to Mr Davis and possibly Mr Rodham. How does that fix the problem with respect to the illegal fence?
That whatever is done through a splay corner as part of or as part of roadworks doesn't override the issue of whether a fence complies with.
So we still have to get that fence removed, changed, cut, whatever it is.
Technically, to act on the action, Stuart, you're probably better to talk.
Okay, and I don't know I don't know much about the Parramatta LEP or the DCP, but can you please explain to me, in the 45 years that Councillor Garrard was the ward member for that ward, what have they done?
Mr Mayor, the only thing I could say in relation to that is that an option for this property is to submit a development application. Any masonry fence requires development approval. So, because then the structure itself needs to be certified at whatever height it is. So that's the option that's available to this property.
So purchasing 5 square metres of the corner won't do anything?
Through Mr Mayor, the council may want to look at that, but they would still need to address the issue of the remainder of the fence one way or the other through a development application process or through demolition.
Thank you, Mr Davis. Now, can I speak against the...
Mr Addy, Councillor Addy, can I just ask a couple of questions?
Sure.
It might add to your...
Yeah, go for it.
Councillor Sarkis.
Through you, Mr Mayor. You talk about the development application. You can't put a development application after the thing's already built. So the advice there is really flawed. So
a building application was refused, and then a new DA is required to change what's there, not to actually allow what's there. Is that correct, Mr.
No.
Davis?
I'll let Mr Davis answer the question.
Yeah.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the approach the council now takes is that a development where there is unauthorised works and that they can lodge a development application. However, that does not verify the structural integrity, if you like, that would normally be done through a construction certificate. And for any works that were existing, you need a building certificate to cover those.
Which was refused.
Primarily because there wasn't a development application with that.
Okay.
And they wouldn't have been, so for example, a development application on that site, and without having seen all the details, but would look at, for example, the traffic safety issues associated with looking at a structure that tall, would look at the amenity, the street amenity, it would look at the zoning of that property and what's likely to occur in the future. Those matters weren't able to be considered through a building certificate, which is essentially looking at the equivalent of a construction certificate, the structural integrity.
Okay. Sorry, Mr Mayor. Sorry, Councillor Sarkis.
Councillor Sarkis.
I'll let him talk, but I'll have questions after he finishes.
Right.
That way,
Thank you.
interject. That's okay.
No,
Well, look, Mr Mayor, what Mr Davis has said is right. If you're building a granny flat or a structure that is going to be habitable, so you would put in a DA for the use of that. But if it's already built, like the fence that's already built, you don't put in a DA for the use of that, because you just put in a building certificate, which would include engineer certificate saying that it's structurally sound and that it complies with the standards of it being built, whatever those Australian standards are. If it was a granny flat or a pergola, for example, then they would need a building certificate as well as a DA to actually use it as a granny flat or a external room or whatever the case may be. But there's no, the way I see it, there's no DA for something that's already built that's a fence. It's just structural adequacy. And then if it doesn't comply for any reason, you'd go through the appropriate steps. That's the way I understand it. Is that correct? These are my questions.
Well, Mr Davis, would you like to comment?
Mr Mayor, the approach that council takes with these, and I think I should recognise previous organisations may have taken different approaches to these, and there is case law to say that you can take one of two approaches, but the current approach that this council takes is that a development application is required in the first place, because it can consider things that a building certificate can't, and it can condition things that a building certificate can't. And then after that, a building certificate for works that have been already been completed, and a construction certificate for any works that still need to be completed to finalise it.
Thank you, Mr Davis. Councillor Sarkis.
This fence was built before it came over to Cumberland, is that correct?
Correct.
And did the fence comply with Parramatta rules and regs?
I don't believe so.
Can somebody that knows tell me?
Mr Fitzgerald, would you like to? Mr Davis?
To Mr Mayor, the answer to that is no, so it didn't comply with their requirements.
Can I ask how, just so I can comprehend?
Okay.
I did walk in late, I got caught in traffic.
So through you, Mr Mayor, in the first place, to construct any fence without approval, which they had no form of approval, if I understand correctly, it must meet the exempt and compliant development code requirements, or the equivalent exempt requirements under the council prior to that. They don't include any masonry fences in those. You can only do basically picket or lightweight fences, and they're limited to 1.2 metres above ground. Under the council's DCP, and the Parramatta's, I believe, had a limit of 1.2, or may have even been 900 for masonry fence. So there are limitations on that DCP as well.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Sarkis?
Yeah, I'm just looking up the Dividing Fences Act while he's doing that, Mr Mayor.
Okay, I'll hand over back to Councillor Addy.
On that, Mr Mayor, the front fence is not a divided fences. It doesn't come under the Act.
Correct, it doesn't come under the...
Mr Mayor, look, speaking against the motion, look, we've heard what we've heard. I am not against getting a report or obtaining a report from council for anything. But we are now obtaining a report for a decision that should not be made by a council with respect of illegal building works. We're going back to the adage that we are now dealing with a planning matter which we're not supposed to be dealing with in the first place. We have it at the compliance department. There are policies in place. They're halfway through the process of doing what they need to do. Why are we now getting involved in a matter which we shouldn't be getting involved in? Where the resolution states to obtain a report to modify the boundary fence on a private property, and Councillor Garrard just affirmed what I actually stated in the first place, is to purchase part of that land to round the corner off. We're not rounding the corner off, we're rounding the property off. And that will not fix the problem, because the fence itself is actually, from what we hear now, could be actually twice the height of what it should be as a masonry fence, not 50% higher, it's actually twice the size, if that is the issue. That will also not fix the problem of the fence being splayed. It won't fix the problem of the fence being set on an angle from the boundary. Admittedly, we can't fix the house because most DCPs now want the house or any object 3 metres away. That can't be fixed, but the house is at least 5 or 6 metres back, which allows for a car to view. But we are going down a very dangerous path in that we are now starting to interfere in private properties, disguising it as a safety concern, exasperated by the property owner themselves. And whether the person is ill, I feel sorry for anyone who is ill. I have people ill in my family. I don't sit there and use them as an excuse because I've made a mistake or did something illegal. That is not what the DCP, the LEP, or common sense dictates. We should not be going down a path that every time an issue occurs because of someone's mistake, let's call it a mistake, they did not know. At the same token, on the way to council this morning, actually this afternoon, there was an accident on the corner of Pitt Street and what's that street I keep complaining about, Mr. Fitzgerald? On Pitt Street, where you turn right. Anyway, there was a Walpole Street. There was a massive accident there this afternoon on the way here. It doesn't mean we actually buy part of the house because they couldn't see the road. If the house has been built illegally and there's a safety issue, the house has got to come first. Then we'll look at if there is still an issue with the roads. We don't go and try and fix the road at our expense because of someone else's fault. So what we're trying to do now is I'll say it again, we are circumventing our planning controls, which we are not supposed to be doing. We are now going on to buying private property because we're trying to fix someone else's error on a private piece of property. That's wrong. Let it go back to the general manager, let the compliance department, who is quite capable of handling this matter, which they're halfway through anyway. You can add finance to them as well to try and find a way to fix their problems. That's no problem. Thank you, Mr. Sheridan. But let the staff take control of an issue that we should not be touching whatsoever. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Addy. Councillor Campbell.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I think it's very clear at this stage that the fence was built illegally, without council consent, and also it doesn't happen to comply. We've also heard tonight that there are safety issues arising out of that. It seems to me that the council staff were taking the correct course in offering these people the opportunity to put in a DA or to modify the fence. The responsibility to fix the fence quite clearly rests on those who erected it in defiance of the council DCP and without putting in a DA. So the question of responsibility is very clear. The responsibility is the landowners, and the council officers have been applying the law, and I think we should return to that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Is there any further discussion?
Yes, second that, Mr. Mayor.
I have a mover that the motion be put. All those in favour? Aye. Against? I declare that carried. Council, right of reply, Councillor Garrard.
Mr. Mayor, I have a little problem understanding Councillor Eddy's logic. Buying a house and buying 5 metres of a front yard doesn't have very much in common. A lot of circumstances happen in public life where you need to resolve issues, and I suppose that's why they say politics is the art of the possible. And trying to resolve this issue in a way which is just is about what this resolution is trying to achieve. When council rezoned the area B1, powers outside of my influence at the time desired that all this land, apparently to the corner, was to be zoned B1. It should have had a corner rounding put there then, because the corner was so busy, and by virtue of the fact that someone obviously felt that it should be business. Now, having said that, the people have had cars career into the front yard. The woman has reacted in a way which I want to protect my family. She's put a fence there which on B1 land perhaps shouldn't have been allowed, and council should have had a rounding there, and the fence would have been on a new alignment. She's willing to put in a DA. I wonder how many DAs have been put in for fun fences across this city. I wonder. I don't think many have at all. And as you drive around this area, you see fences that simply do not comply. Now, I don't make it, one of my priorities every morning to get up and drive around and write down fences that don't comply. But if we're going to start doing that, and going to start action against this one, well then it's going to be on for young and old everywhere. On another corner, not very far from here, there's a woman. Unfortunately, another woman gets picked on. A woman has a hedge grown to a right angle, right to the corner. It is on a corner which is as busy as this one. So what are you going to do there? It's not a masonry fence. It's vegetation. So how are we going to control that? Well, we'll get the letter of the law and say, listen, it can only be 1.2 metres high. But she has a hedge going right up the side of the fence, right up the boundary of the road, the same as this has a 1.8 metre fence, up the boundary of the side boundary of the road, and it goes across the front of the yard as well. It obstructs views. So we'll go and put the knife into her as well and say, listen, get rid of your hedge because it doesn't comply. So if the idea of this resolution was to put up to council an opportunity for that section of the fence, the corner rounding, to be conformed with. Well, I can't help it if they fire shots at people and they bounce off their front fence. No, that's right. Perhaps in Auburn you've got to have a fence to keep bullets out. I don't know. But at the end of the day, if we're going to, I take exception to that, Mr. Mayor. Could you just shut this voice up down here?
Councillor Garrard has the floor. Thank you, Councillor.
You've got a mouth as wide as your parents' front yard.
Thank you, Councillor Garrard. If you would sum up.
I'm summing up, but I've got a right to talk without being interrupted by the leader of the Liberal Party.
I agree.
Okay. He had his chance to talk at the Auburn inquiry.
If Councillor Garrard is going to make remarks about myself, I have the right to respond.
Well,
he opened the door, not myself.
No personal reflections.
Well, he started. I didn't say a word.
Well, I can call for an adjournment, or we can finish the debate.
Just finish it off.
Councillor Garrard, you have the floor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I thought you said that before, Mr. Mayor. I thought you said that before, but someone didn't hear you. I could offer someone a hearing aid if they like. But the point is, I don't want this council inundated with DAs for front fences. This person, the applicant, the owner of the land, undoubtedly is willing to put in a DA and willing to put in a survey certificate and a building certificate and anything else required at that time when it's required. What I'm asking for at this point in time is that council consider a report to allow sight lines to improve traffic safety, which happens to require council purchasing perhaps up to 5 metres of a front land.
Councillor Garrard, that closes debate. I have a motion moved Councillor Garrard, seconded Councillor Elmore, and I have an amendment moved Councillor Addy, seconded Councillor Zareka, as written. I will put the amendment and I will call for a division. All those in favour of the amendment, please raise your hands. Well, I've just fought the call of certain Councillor Addy, Councillor Zareka, Councillor Groves, Councillor Zeta, Councillor Wong, Councillor Lake, Councillor Saha, Councillor Hamid, Councillor Christou, Councillor Campbell and Councillor Cummings. Those against? Councillor Garrard, Councillor Sarkis and Councillor Elmore. I declare the amendment carried. The amendment now becomes the motion. All those in favour of the motion? Councillor Addy, Councillor Zareka, Councillor Grove, Councillor Zeta, Councillor Wong, Councillor Lake, Councillor Saha, Councillor Hamid, Councillor Christou, Councillor Campbell and Councillor Cummings. Those against? Councillor Garrard, Councillor Sarkis. I declare that carried. Notice of councillors, item 118, notice of motion Woodville Golf Course. I have a notice of motion by Councillor Garrard as written. Is there a second for that motion before I ask Councillor Garrard to speak? Councillor Sarkis, thank you. Councillor Garrard, would you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. For those who may be in the know, Woodville Golf Course doesn't have any irrigation on the site, and has been that way for any number of years, and it's received a low priority from that area of money being spent in South Granville, and by virtue of that, golf courses, of course, when you've got land, grass or ground that's as hard as cement, might help get some distance in your drives, but it certainly doesn't help you play good golf or attract people to the golf course to ensure that there's a bit of better business operation running out of that course as well. The opportunity is there for us to upgrade the course. I look forward to getting a review of this as outlined in the motion in order to enable the Woodville Golf Course to be irrigated.
Thank you, councillor Garrard. I have councillor Christou, then councillor Elmore, then councillor Wong. Councillor Christou.
Mr Mayor, thank you. Look, I've got no problem supporting the irrigation of the Woodville Golf Course. I've had discussions with councillor Garrard beforehand, quite a while ago about it. Just one thing I would like to propose in the funding source. I think perhaps the funds should be coming out of the Woodville Reserve, and I would like to propose an amendment that that's where those funds need to come from.
Well, I'll ask the mover and the seconder if they're willing to accept that amendment. Are you, councillor?
I wouldn't endeavour to try and overstress the budget for the General Council. Of course, they would need to come from the Woodville Reserve.
Thank you, councillor Garrard. Councillor Sarkis, do you accept that proposal?
Mr Mayor, I'd accept it, but at this point, I think we need to find out how much it costs first. And so I don't think, although I accept where you're coming from, I don't think it should be a part of this motion, because if it's going to cost more than what we have in the reserve, then it's not going to be a project that's feasible. So I think, yeah. I think the motion in its original form will serve the report. Once we get that, then we can determine if we do go ahead and where the funds come from. Would you accept that, councillor Christou?
Councillor Christou.
That's quite a reasonable request. We'll get the look. No, look, I'm quite firm on this. We'll get the report, and I'm going to stick to this. We're going to get the report, and once we get the report, then we can, assess. So I'll stick to my original amendment. So I want it, if we're going to go ahead with it, it needs to come out of the Woodville Reserve.
Stating that let's find out first how much. I'm happy to put down, and if it's feasible, we get it out of the Woodville. Otherwise, we're not going to proceed with it. Do you know what I mean?
You're correct, councillor Sarkis, if there's sufficient funds left in the Woodville ward, depending on the cost.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Can we reach a compromise of if that funding?
Just a point of explanation.
Thank you, councillor.
I've spoken to council staff about this, and I mean, I'm not going to put something up that's going to cost $1 million when you've only got 8, for instance, right? However, I do appreciate from comments that I've heard from council staff is that it'll occupy about 1/6 of the half the money that's been already cut in half by the Granville project. So if there's 8 million left over, or 7 million, it'll occupy about 1/6 of that. But it'll be in a report that comes forward, and when you do that, you'll know what you're talking about.
Thank you, councillor Garrard. I think the easiest way for this, as you are willing to accept the proposal from councillor Christou and councillor Sarkis isn't, if councillor Sarkis would withdraw his support as the second and councillor Christou pick it up as the seconder.
It's frivolous at this point.
All right.
To put that in.
Well, you've accepted that, so there's no need for the amendment, councillor Christou. There's no need for the amendment now, as the mover and a seconder have accepted.
No.
Thank you. I have councillor Elmore, then councillor Addy, then councillor Rami. Councillor Elmore.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's remarkable how we're going to spend this Granville Reserve, because there was a big proposal come up with no consultation with anybody about how to spend that money first up. But anyway, I get around the area a lot, and I know a few local golfers, and actually our staff club at work, they've got a golf club. They go around the local golf courses, and they often play at Woodville. And they played at Woodville a few weeks ago, and I said, "Oh, how was the course?" And they said it was very dry. Said that the creepers were trying to keep the greens. The greens are well watered, and they've apparently done that, but the fairways are extremely dry. We've had that really dry period this year between Christmas and probably now, that we haven't had much rain at all, and the golf course was in pretty poor condition. I understand there's some recycled water that comes through there. There's a tank in Barber's Road, isn't it, Councillor Garrard? That stores recycled water that comes through from Cumberland somewhere. So it's a good opportunity to make our assets better, to improve our assets. It's a good golf course. Councillor Garrard used to have the Pro-Am there years ago, and it was a very successful event. So, our assets are on display. We get people coming from other parts of the LGA to play in our golf courses, so they should be well maintained.
Thank you, Councillor Elmore. Councillor Addy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question, if someone can clarify. Mr. Mayor, I read this motion to state that we're actually approving what's required to be done, but then coming back and seeing what it's going to cost. I mean, Councillor Sarkis was on the right path, but I don't have an issue with the Woodville Golf Course, but I think the course does need a lot of work. And I agree with the Councillor Garrard that it does need a lot of irrigation because it is quite dry, especially in the upper reaches. However, if you're stating that get a report back to council on the timeline to complete the project and also propose the source of funds be the Woodville Ward Reserve Fund, I mean, you're actually telling us where the money's coming from and you're telling us that let us know what it's going to cost and when it's going to be completed.
I take it that there may not be sufficient funding.
Funds, exactly.
So until we get the report, but if there is sufficient funding, it at least has been identified of where it's going to come.
I don't have an issue. I just don't want the report to reflect that, yes, we've approved that work and let's try and find the money for it.
No, the report would have to come back to council.
Exactly.
So, I've got, yep, you're up next, Councillor Zaraka. Yep.
Is it right to actually say that? Because it's more of a notation. It shouldn't be and the proposed source, because the and makes it a secondary limb to the first motion. It becomes and the proposed source will come from the reserve. So it's almost predetermining the result.
Proposed source may come from the...
Why don't we just write it down? End it at the end of the project.
I'll leave it to the solicitors.
Yeah, the report provide us with.
And whoever.
Bigger things to worry about than may or with.
Thought we got rid of May a couple of months ago.
Whoever.
And be the Woodville Reserve Fund.
Yeah.
Look, we know what the intention is. However, I've seen in the past where some councils have used a way in which to get what they want, which I don't have an issue with this motion, to actually put it before you actually find the funds. That's all. It's as Council Lake always does this. It's a matter of protecting the council before anything wrong goes through.
No, I agree, but we know that until we get the report, and it'll have to come back to council, and whether we move ahead or not, it'll be a council decision.
Yes.
And is everybody comfortable with the motion as written?
Yes.
Okay. Councillor Zaraka?
It still doesn't. It doesn't sit well. Yeah. And whether the proposed funds can be the Woodville. I think it should be a full stop at the end of the project, and should just say and that the report identify and the report identify where the source of funds can arise, and preferably from Woodville, because that's, I mean, you don't want to say okay, the cost is going to be $2 million, okay, and then and Councillor Garrard's already spent his share of it. It's all automatically gone through. So it carries.
I've already indicated. I've consulted with staff. In fact, the staff have been so kind, they worded the resolution. So if you think it's wrong, go back to the staff, all right, and tell them they worded it wrongly, right? Because I know it's going to be under attack by the likes of you and others because there's a word wrong or a word somewhere else, right? But rather than me cop the can, they can cop the can, all right? I believe it reads adequately to get a report back here so you know how much money you're dealing with, and already told me how much money, all right? But I don't want to put that in the paper because then you tell everybody else when you want to tender how much money you've got. So I'm being very tongue-in-cheek about putting up a resolution to get some water on that course. Is anything any harder than that?
All I'm suggesting is, and in fact, in the spirit of the motion, I actually support it.
Sit down and get on with business.
Councillor Zareka has the floor.
Mr. Put it back to the original motion, let's vote on it.
I'd prefer if it goes back to the original motion. I'm supporting the irrigation problem that we've got on a golf course, and I think there's plenty of money in the kitty without having to extend it to the fund. And if there isn't, we can.
So, Councillor Zareka, you will move an amendment.
No, just if Councillor Garrard's okay, go back to the original motion, that's it, done.
Well,
Mr Mayor, I've had my button pressed before. 1, 2, 3
speakers got up and spoke before
I know, but they were...
You asked me to hold off, and I've held off, and they keep getting up and talking.
I'll allow Councillor Sarkis to speak and then try and work out where we are from here.
Look, Mr. Mayor, I think the intent of the motion is clear to everybody, and that's to get a report on how much it's going to cost. I agreed to the amendment that was suggested by Councillor Christo just to satisfy him, but it's getting worse than better. At the end of the day, this is a sporting field. It's a golf course. It's not for the people that live in the Woodville ward, because when I lived in Greystanes, I went and played there a couple of times, and I'm not a good golfer, but I was invited to go down, and we had a couple of games down it. You get people go to that golf course from every part of Cumberland and adjoining councils, Mr. Mayor. I bumped into a guy from Coffs Harbour at the local government association, the ALG conference that we were just at, from Coffs Harbour, who said to me, I played golf, coincidentally, at the guy with the turban, you saw him. He played golf at Woodville golf course. And he said to me, and he said the exact words of, good course, but no maintenance. What are you guys doing? This is what he says to me, right? So, and I didn't get to read the business paper, as Brendan will tell you, till today. So it's very relevant what Councillor Garrard brings up. Where the funds come from, I couldn't give two hoots whether they came from the Woodville ward funds or they came from Parks and Gardens or wherever else. If the work needs to be done to sustain a sporting field in this LGA, then we should spend that money. So, Mr. Mayor, if Councillor Garrard would move his original motion, I'm happy to second that. Let's get this report and get this show on the road. We're wasting time for nothing.
Well, I'll put that once I've got some clarification in my mind. Excuse me, councillors. To try and get clarity, Councillor Garrard, have you withdrawn your support for the first proposal and gone back to the original?
After what I went through in that last motion, trying to get a lousy corner rounding around here, now I get the staff to write something up and they wants to get knocked over. No way in the world am I going to have 50 cents each way on it, right? If the Labor Party over there feel they've got to spell it out and they don't know what a report means, I'll stick with that. All I want is a bloody report.
All right, and Councillor Sarkis, you're willing. Councillor Christo, you did move an amendment. Do you want to have that amendment?
Yes, I do. I want it quite clearly written that once the costings are reported, if council agrees to go ahead with that, the Woodville Reserve should be considered. Should be used. Preferred.
I'm going to call for a second for that. Seconded, Councillor Rami.
I want it preferred.
Okay, now I've had a call from Councillor Grove that the motion be put. All those in favour?
Can we just get 1 second to read it? Hang on a second.
Look, I've had a call that you have a motion and an amendment before you. I'll call, and I'm going to call. I've had a move that the motion be put. All those in favour? Right, now, we have the original motion, moved Councillor Garrard, seconded Councillor Sarkis, and we have the amendment, moved Councillor Christo and seconded Councillor Rami. I will put the amendment. All those in favour of the amendment? Against? On the voices, I declare it lost. No, I said I declare it carried. Thank you. I've had a call for a show of hands. We'll put the amendment. All those in favour, right, please raise your hands. Councillor Grove, Councillor Rami, Councillor Wong, Councillor Lake, Councillor Saha, Councillor Hamid, Councillor Christou, Councillor Campbell and Councillor Addy. Those against? Councillor Zareka, Councillor Zada, Councillor Garrard, Councillor Sarkis and Councillor Cummings. I declare the amendment carried. The amendment now becomes the motion. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried. Council, I asked if there's any person wishes to make a verbal representations public on the proposed closure of this meeting. Call forward to speak. I then asked for the Acting General Manager to read out any written representations from the public.
No representation,
No
Mr Mayor.
As a procedural motion will now be moved that in accordance with section 10A clause 2D and 2.1 of the Local Government Act 1993, Council enters into closed session to discuss As per item CO6/18-19 tender evaluation report for the future of use of the former Auburn RSL Bowling Club, Council has resolved the following. That Council resolves to decline all tenders in accordance with clause 1781B and 1783A of the Local Government General Regulations 2005, and a report be brought back to Council with new options that provide greater public benefit for the use of the current building and surrounding area, with the potential options of it being used as a community centre for the community. Thank you. I'll declare the meeting closed at 8:42.
I move that way, Mr. Mayor. I was just going to ask a general question.
Sorry.